those of you who don't know me, my name is Elise. That's all you're getting right now because we'll talk about who I am later because it's important to know who you are and stuff, right? And that's what we're talking about. Because, well, first of all, let's this week and next week, we're starting a series called Back to the Basics. Because, let's be real, everyone needs a refresher course sometimes on, like, the basics. So, tonight, it's we are called. Next week, it's we are loved. It's, like, pretty basic stuff, right? Like, you're called, like, hey girl, what's up? And then next week, it's like, I just love you. You. Christian passion. So that's the back to the basics, because for those of you who haven't heard it, congratulations, good to hear it. For those of you who have heard it, listen up, because you need to hear it again. Everyone needs to hear it. Over and over. Because you can never talk about your calling, you can never talk about how much you love, ever. So, tonight, we are called. And so, like, I've got like 2 weeks to prepare for this talk, and I'm like sitting there like thinking about this, and I'm like, what in the world am I going to talk about for we are called? Because it's such a basic thing. Like in scripture, like they talk about calling like every other sentence. It's like, I am called to worship. I am called, and like there's like naming things that are involved in like calling. There's like, I call you, some call you slaves, I call you friends, I've called you out of darkness. Like there's like just, it's everywhere. Like calling is like probably one of the big words that they use in the Bible. Like you had to count it, it's probably getting there a million times. So like, I'm gonna talk about a calling as like who you are, as an identity. Like, who are we when we say that we're called, right? So, just as an example of some like scripture things that we'll use later, but like here are a couple examples. No, the three, the one. Cool. So, there are 3 different things there. So, through him we have received the grace of apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among all the Gentiles, among whom you are also, who are called to belong to Jesus Christ, to all the beloved of God in Rome, called to be holy. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And then that's from Romans. That's what it says. And those who he predestined, he also called. Those whom he called, he also justified. Those whom he justified, he also glorified. But you are, and then also you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So this is just like 3 times. And like, trust me when I say there's like a billion more I could have chosen from. So, let's hop on this page. So my talk, I'm going to focus on 2 things. We are called what? Like, I'm called Elise. And then we are called to do what? So like, who, like, we are called what is kind of like who we are. And then we are called to do what? It's what we do with that identity, with that name, with what we are called, okay? So let's start with, we are called what? So, my name's Elise. My full name's Elise Earley. So like, I'm called Elise. I'm also called a campus ministry intern. I'm also called a sister, a daughter, a niece, a granddaughter. I'm called a friend. I'm called a cousin. I'm called, I don't even know. What do people call me? Some good things, not bad things. What do people call me? When I was in college, because I just graduated in May, I was called a PA, a DA, I worked for Earley. I was called a CSA exec board member. I was called a retreat director. I was called an E3 team member. I was called all of these things, and all of those things make up who I am, right? Because all of those things are part of my story. I could go back years. I could go back all of my 22 years and tell you every identity that I've ever owned, you know? Like, I was a Catholic schoolgirl. Not. Like, I'm from St. Louis. That's part of my identity. I'm not a Cardinals fan unless they're doing really well. Part of my identity. like, those are all things that make up who I am. So, like, and we all have, like, these multiple identities. Like, it's actually kind of incredible that, like, all of us aren't going through, like, multiple personality disorder at any given time because we have all of these stories that make up who we are, right? No one is just one thing. Everyone is a billion things because everyone has a billion different moments in their life, and each one of those moments make up who you are. It's part of your identity, right? Yes? Gotta give me the feedback because I'm nervous. So let's go back to one thing that we already looked at. Let's look at the verse from Peter. What's wrong with Peter? There we go. So he says in St. Paul, because he's a saint, he knows he's talking about. He says, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who has called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. So there's a calling again. There's another identity that we own. We are called a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own. That's, again, part of our identity. So while we all have all of these different identities that play into who we are, all of us are ultimately one thing, and that's a child of God, a chosen, holy, beloved child of God. And that's really all you need to know, right? Because that is what we were before we were born, when we were chosen. And that is what we are going to be long after we leave this earth, long after people forget who you are. And that's kind of morbid, sorry. But eventually, people will forget that you lived there. Unless you do something awesome, like become a saint. So be saints. But it's a truth, right? Being a child of God is ultimately who we are. I said my name was Elise. That's how I introduced myself. But even my name can be changed nowadays. Do you really think Chad Ochocinco really his mom was yeah, that's a great choice for a name. So I'm gonna name him that. No, he changed his name to that. People can change their name all the time. What else is more tied to your identity than your name? Right? How many of y'all are freshmen? Hello. So you know how when you meet people, especially now that you're in college, they ask for 4 things, hi, what's your name, where are you from, what's your major, where are you living? Those 4 questions make up the whole of who you are in that immediate thing. Obviously there's more to you than those 4 questions. But do you ever say hi, my name's Elise, I'm from St. Louis, my major was biology and religious studies. I lived in Jones and then I lived in Discovery, and I'm a child of God. No one does that. No one says that. But really, if we're really thinking about it, that is who we are. Totally and completely who we are. The core of our being is as a child of God. We were chosen for that. Dude, do you even realize that you have that identity? Because there's a million things that you can do in college, right? Hang on, let me find where I am. Next page. There's a million things that you can do in college. How many organizations are there? 700? And you can belong to all of them, you can belong to none of them. And all of those kind of make up who you are in college. And college is great. You get to try on all of these different identities and have very little ties to that identity after you're gone. I just graduated. I can tell you right now, the fact that I was an RA matters to no one now that I'm out of college. Because no one knows what an RA is anymore. The people that I worked with did, but that was so temporary, and yet it was still such a part of who I was. There are people here that belong to sororities, fraternities, they belong to political action groups, they belong to service organizations, they belong to a million different things, and that's great. awesome. All of those things make up who you are in college. As long as you remember, at the core of your being, you are a child of God. Let's see. Cool. So, yeah. We can try on all of these different identities, and they're awesome. College is where you find yourself, right? That's what they say, Elise. And that's very true. You define who you are, what is important to you in college. And that all, like, it decides your career most of the time. Once you decide a major, like, dude, you're done. Like, get on the job train. But like you make these big decisions, and yet you can change them in college. You can change, add, remove, do all these different things, and that's great. You have all these decisions about who you're going to be. But the one thing that's not going to change, ever, is that you're a child of God. That you were chosen for holiness. Okay? So now, we're going to get to the we are called to do what part. Because we are called children of God. So, we have all of these identities. And sometimes we don't realize and we forget that we are children of God and we're meant for holiness and we're chosen for holiness and we're chosen to be saints. And so all of these identities, like, make us make choices, right? Like, I'm going to pick on Kathleen. Kathleen's in a sorority. Being in a sorority is awesome, okay? Sisterhood forever. But, like, if her sorority is encouraging her to do things that are, like, taking away from her holiness, taking away from her identity as a child of God, like how does that identity fit with the fact that you're a child of God? When you are a child of God first. Like, you can have all of these different organizations that you belong to, but they have to be pushing you towards holiness. Okay? They have to be pushing you towards greatness. Because we are called to be holy. We are called to do what? Be holy. So, I have examples here. There are these, Kathleen. But I'll go through a few more. So, we might be in a fraternity. I obviously was. Where our fraternity brothers are telling us to go out on a Sunday night instead of going to eat in the house. Okay? Like, and you have a decision to make there. And like, I'm not going to judge that decision. Do what you want. But if we're putting our identity as a child of God before our identity as a fraternity brother, like, that's going to change how we make that decision. Okay? We might be in a certain political group where we have to confront issues that may or may not be in line with the church's teachings. And so, like, how you identify yourself as a child of God is going to help you articulate what it is that you believe politically within that group, however you see fit. Okay, the one that I think everyone can relate to is we might take our identity as a student, because you all are students, I'm not a student, you all are students, and put it before our identity as a child of God, and it might prevent us from going to a small group, from going to church, from going to E3, because you say, you know what, I'm just way too busy right now with my schoolwork to set a little time aside for God. Right? Like, can people identify with that? Am I making sense, or is everyone like, I want church to go? So like I said before, long before you were here, long after you're gone, you will be a child of God. Like, all of these things are important and wonderful and great. We want you to study. We want you to be a part of your fraternity. We want you to be involved in politics and vote and all of that stuff. We want you to do all of that. But we want you to remember that you're a child of God primarily. Okay? So, Romans chapter 1. So, through him we have received received the grace of apostleship to bring about the obedience of faith for the sake of his name among all the Gentiles, among whom you are also, who are called to belong to Jesus Christ. To all the beloved of God in Rome, called to be holy, grace to you and peace from our God, Father, and Holy Spirit. I can't read that. Yes. So here we say, we received the grace of apostleship. So what does that mean, right? What are we called to do? Because, part of our calling as a child of God is also to call others. It's to make them recognize their identities as a child of God. So all of those different organizations give you access to lots of different people who are also children of God. So, these multiple identities don't necessarily have to be in conflict. Because when a friend of yours says, hey, you want to study? And you're like, oh no, I'm actually going to go to church right now. It's 8 o'clock on a Sunday, church time. And she's like, oh, I was Catholic growing up. Maybe I'll go with you. Guess what, dude? You just evangelized them. You just got them to church. Way to go, team. Pat yourself on the back for that one. Great job. Because, your identity as a student came with your identity as a child of God. And then you said that to somebody else, and they recognize themselves as a child of God, too. Awesome. Way to go. Do that. Last thing I want to leave you with, and I feel like I left out a whole bunch of things that I practiced, but oh well. Is that God doesn't leave you high and dry, right? God doesn't let you just flounder in this multiple identity crisis where I want to be a child of God, but I also have homework and stuff, and I also want to be a nice sorority fraternity, and I also want to be involved, and I actually want to have friends, and I actually want to sleep. Good luck balancing that one. But he doesn't leave you high and dry. He doesn't leave you alone, ever. Okay, so the last one, Romans 8. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. So think back to the first one with Hebrew. You were chosen, so you were predestined to be his. Okay? Then, you answered your calling as a child of God. And by accepting that identity, you are justified in that. I don't know what justified looks like to you, but to me it's yeah, I'm justified, listen up, I know what's going on. That's what I think of when I think of justified. I might be crazy, but who knows, you're listening to me anyway. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. So when you evangelize, when you accept this calling, you are glorified in that. You are made holy in that. Right? I'm that's kind of why we're here, y'all. To be holy, to be saints, to get into heaven. In short, I'll read this verbatim. Our calling is our identity formed within us before our birth. And that calling is to be a holy child of God. And in answering our call to holiness, we inspire others to accept their call to holiness. You have a massive amount of influence on this campus, and you don't even know it. Because you have the ability to meet so many people and touch their lives. Okay? And it matters how you identify yourself. It matters how you go up and introduce yourself. It matters that you are a child of God. So put that as the forefront of your identity. I am holy and loved child of God. And everything else will follow. I'm done.